Just think, it's 1980, about to be 1981, and a group of people in maroon red, like my sweater, approaches you. And they want you to follow them. They want you to join their utopian movement and live the dream in Oregon. And all they're preaching is free love, happiness, sex. Sounds pretty great, right? Well, that was not the case with the Rajneeshi. So this group actually sought out to control, manipulate, and gain power over as many followers as they possibly could to help them create the city of their dreams, this utopia. So let's just talk about that for a second. So, as you know, there's been very many unsuccessful cults, but the Rajneeshi were actually pretty successful in the beginning of their movement. So they actually gained a following of upwards of 14,000 people, and they even built their own city called Rajneeshpuram from the ground up. So let's just backtrack and talk about cults for a second and cult history. So, according to the Journal of Law and Health, cults share typically a few of the same traits, and those traits include that they are authoritarian, they are totalistic and communal, they are aggressive, which the Rajneesh definitely were. They were they shared the same programs of indoctrination. They were typically relatively new to the United States, and their clientele was typically middle class, and these were all the same categories of the Rajneeshis. So let's just backtrack about 10 years to the beginning of their movement. So it actually started in Manoli, India in about 1970. So the Indian government actually did not like the Rajneeshi people because they were disrespectful. So the leader, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, he kind of disrespected a lot of the Hindu beliefs. He was a self-proclaimed the second Buddha. He thought he was all that in a bag of chips, y'all. Like he was it in his head. So he didn't care if he disrespected anyone. He told his lieutenant and his right hand woman, Ma Anand Sheila, let's go to the United States, find me some land, let's move, and let's just pack up and take all the followers with me. So Sheila actually found what was called at the time Big Muddy Ranch. Big Muddy Ranch was about 64,000 acres of land, untouched, uncharted, just rugged terrain. And y'all, they actually built a city. So they called it Rajneeshpuram, and they built roads by way of bulldozers. They had airports, they had a school, they had a hospital, they had a meditation center that could hold up to 10,000 people at the time. They had restaurants. Like when you think about what a city needs, they had it all. They had everything. And they even did something pretty shady. They blocked off their roads by like way of construction so that other people in Oregon couldn't get to them because they didn't want anybody in their business. They didn't like that. And this really made the outlying cities really mad, which that was Antelope, Oregon and Dalles, Oregon. So the city of Dallas, their government, they actually went to Congress to try to get rid of these people because in their heads they had to be up to no good because they were having big orgies of upwards of 50 people, which they were calling them sex parties, and they had guns, and they just could not be up to no good. Like they were nosy, they wanted to know what was going on, so if they couldn't know, then they had to go. Okay, so the Rajneesh people didn't like this. And so what do? You know how I told you that they have everything? They had a medical lab. So they got a sample of salmonella bacteria and they went into different restaurants in Dallas and infected their salad bars. Guys, they infected 750 people. 750. And do you know that even the Center for Disease and Control, they didn't even know at the time. Like they couldn't figure out like what was going on. Why are all these people sick? There's nothing linking them. It's not just one restaurant. It's a few, but there's no pattern. It was the Rajneesh, which will actually lead to a later charge that we'll talk about in a little bit. So this becomes the downfall of the Rajneesh because they want all this power. So what they started doing was they would round up homeless people on buses and they would get these homeless people and put them in these houses that they were building, and they would, like they had their vote by then. They were feeding these people, they were housing them, they were for them. Like they were just, automatic Rajneesh because they had nowhere else to go. And so they were really trying to take over everything, which, you know, when that happens, that's greed, and that leads to greed and crime, which is exactly what happened, and that's what led to the downfall of the actual city because they got greedy, which the actual leader, oh, he started hanging out with Hollywood people and celebrities, and they were forcing flashy stuff on him, which got the attention of a lot of the federal government. So they started investigating, and Ma Anand Sheila, the right-hand woman, she and the other leadership circle, they ended up getting charged with arson, wiretapping within the community, conspiracy to commit a murder, and poisoning by way of salmonella bacteria to 750 people, which that's bioterrorism, guys. So that's a big no-no, especially to the government. So that is what took them down. And at the time, Bhagwan actually denounced Sheila when all this happened. He was like, I have nothing to do with her. I don't know her. New phone, who dis? He wanted no parts whatsoever. And so he actually took a plea bargain and ended up having to go back to India. So when that happened, the followers kind of dispersed. You know, their leader left them. Like, the whole city fell apart. And so everyone just kind of went out on their own, and like they would still practice the movement and like his teachings, but they would have their own like baby communes, like 10 to 15 people in a house living together. And that's just, it just fell apart. And so, you know what? Out of all those 14,000 people, it was crazy to see how quick it just dispersed. And, you know, it may seem fun, it may seem cool to be in a cult for a little bit, or maybe even being a cult leader, but don't do it. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, because as great as it sounds, the hardship's not worth it, and neither is the jail time.